We are trying to start this conference by being as provocative as possible, because in my experience, conferences are boring. And if you don't say something provocative, it doesn't get people beginning to discuss things. It's AI and the end of mass higher education. То есть искусственный интеллект и смерть массового высшего образования. Ну, я думаю, что это достаточно провокативно. Будем надеяться. So Ewan and I worked together for a number of years at Narcos, and every time I come to Almaty, we discuss AI. So this is basically our kitchen discussion made for a broader audience. All right, so in the contemporary world, universities seem like a completely monolithic and immutable fact of life. As you know, universities started growing in the United States after World War II and now have grown into a $1 trillion industry, which is a pretty large industry in the world, with about 250 million students. And essentially, the rise of universities has been fueled by, or maybe provoked, the rise of the information and knowledge economy. Graduates graduate, they get jobs in this expanding knowledge economy. Because they do more things, the knowledge economy expands, it has room for more graduates, and it keeps going. The problem with things like that is ultimately they are a Ponzi scheme. You know what a Ponzi scheme is, yes? So if for some reason the end point stops or changes, then suddenly the system that seemed like it was endlessly growing stops being able to function. So this system that we have now is fueled by a rather strange consensus, or an enormous consensus. So from a student perspective, you should get an undergraduate degree, bachelor's degree, because you make more money. We know historically students with, or over the last 50 years, students with bachelor's degrees have done better economically than students who don't get bachelor's degrees. You also have the opportunity to meet friends, to hang around, have a great time, spend 4 years spending your parents' money and going to sports events and discos and all the other great things that go along with student life. Maybe you pick up a network of people for your future life. So in general, it's a great thing from a student perspective. From a university perspective, it's also a great thing because more undergraduates pays the bills and allows universities to do the research they want to do. They can afford to do it because either the state pays in countries where taxpayer money does it, or individuals pay, and those undergraduates subsidize the more interesting parts of life for the university. So from university perspective, more undergraduates means more possibilities, more faculty, more research, more of the kinds of things universities want to do. From society's perspective, it's great to have more bachelor students because it keeps young people off the streets. At the age of 18, 19, young people are very dangerous people if they have nothing to do. If they're in universities, we keep them busy, maybe they learn something. And of course, once they graduate, they get jobs, they pay taxes. That's all good from a societal perspective. So from society's perspective, it's also good if universities keep expanding. And from a business perspective, it's good because they need bodies to staff this information economy. And maybe they don't get the bodies exactly that they want, and maybe they have to complain that they have to be retrained. But in the end, it's still better than doing it all themselves. So they hire these people, and the cycle keeps going on. And so that's where we are with this consensus, and that's why we have more and more and more universities, more and more bachelor's programs in countries like Kazakhstan. They set a goal of having more and more percentage of students, of high school students going on to university, getting bachelor's degrees. It's how countries measure each other, what percentage of students get bachelor's degrees. But there's a couple of problems with this system. It's an extremely inefficient system. It's inefficient, and in a way, it's inefficient by design. So most students at universities don't do very much. All of us who teach at universities and work at universities know this is true. 80%, 75% of the students don't work very hard, don't learn very much. And that's okay from the university's perspective because they effectively subsidize the 25% of the students who want to work really hard and want to learn a lot. Right? By not coming to my office hours, they save me time. By not making me work very hard to teach them, they save me time. I can spend that time doing my research or working with the 25% of the students who want to work. But as I said, so the slackers subsidize the rest. The faculty don't like it. They don't like having all these bad students, but it's better than nothing, because if they didn't have those students, they wouldn't have a job. So somehow they put up with that. And again, it's annoying for business because the graduates aren't all that good, but it's still better than nothing. So they deal with it. So this is the world we live in. It's an inefficient system. Universities know that it's all, I mean, at Satpayev University with 16,000 students at the moment, they probably know that only 3,000 or 4,000 of them are serious. And they don't even know which ones it's going to be when they start. They don't care. They know it's a statistical number that will be serious, but who they are doesn't really make that much difference. However, here is our new world. We need to ask the question, what happens if AI grows the knowledge economy but diminishes the need for knowledge workers? Okay, so this is where the Ponzi scheme potentially runs into its biggest problem. So we have some scenarios for what might happen in this situation, and let Ewan add a few words here before we get into these scenarios.
Okay, and first of all, thanks very much for the chance to talk about this stuff. When Andrew's talking about Ponzi schemes, and it's where things get real. Yeah, universities define themselves successfully for the past at least 20 years on employability. Yeah, the question is, what happens when, because of AI, more jobs at entry level disappear? That link gets broken. So one, how does the university cope with that? How does it redefine itself? And secondly, the students, it diminishes part of the reason for going to university in the first place. So we have these three scenarios, which we're coming at it from different perspectives. One is a more kind of, this is what I know from my experience. The other, we're trying to conceptualize and simplify it, because all of us know, as humans, we can't understand everything that's coming at it. We need a way to simplify it. So we'll go through the scenarios and some ideas on how we might begin to simplify it. But the key thing is, to take from all of these scenarios, is the status quo, things staying as they are, that's not a scenario. That's fundamentally important to get right at the start. Andrew?
Yes, so I agree. The chance that universities will be able to just muddle through, as they have with previous technological change, and keep doing pretty much what they do now to the same students in the same numbers, we both think is simply not a viable alternative. And one of the things that's going to happen in the course of this conference today, I think, is different people from different kinds of perspectives are going to be talking precisely about this brave new world that we're entering. And so we're kind of circling around this topic from different ways. Our goal here is simply to be, as I say, provocative at the entry point. So scenario number one is this one that we don't think is very likely. And the amazing thing about this is you look at these two slides, right? So here you have a medieval university in a hall pretty much like this one, with somebody giving a lecture. Here you have a hall from 2 years ago or something like that, pretty much the same hall, only the clothes are a little bit different, and the technology is a little bit different, but effectively, has anything changed since 1300 into this hall? Well, yeah, a few things have changed, but it's amazing, absolutely incredible how much universities were able to simply keep doing things the way they had always done them for 700 years. And today we're still doing the same thing right here today, to some extent. So the belief is that somehow universities will keep being able to do what they're doing, and the argument for that is that previous technological changes that were supposed to change everything, of which we've seen a lot over the last 30 years, didn't actually change that much. So, for example, many of you are old enough to remember the appearance of MOOCs. Right? MOOCs were supposed to change everything. They were going to completely destroy the existing university system. Blah, blah. They didn't destroy anything. They didn't change anything. Universities incorporated some of them, mostly ignored them. They're used for all sorts of things, but they didn't fundamentally change anything universities did. Or the internet, which was going to change everything. It didn't. We figured out how to incorporate it into our existing schema and kept going. So our argument, however, is that this is the default position of big higher ed, of major universities. They simply aren't willing to deal with the scenario that says, well, no, we won't be able to do things in the same way. So they continue by default or on purpose to simply pretend that somehow it will all come out all right, the same way it always has come out all right.
Could I just say something here? This is very common in conversations about AI. In my view, it's driven by two things. One, most people who talk about it don't know much about it. So if you don't know much about something, you can't really understand the implications. The second thing is, in my view, and I'm sure a lot of people who have a lot of exposure to using AI, this is different. It's different because, for the first time, the student has access at the same time as the institution and the faculty do. That completely changes the agency, the ability to use in education or in anything else. So the university doesn't control the technology in a way that it did in the past with MOOCs and various other things.
So scenario number 2 says, well, yes, we universities are going to have to do a lot of new things and a lot of quick things and make a lot of changes, but somehow we are flexible enough to do that, right? So this is a, quotes, modern flipped classroom, right? So this is something universities have been doing now for the last 15, 20 years, at least good ones have, where the faculty member no longer stands in front of the students and gives them a lecture, but works with the students in groups to try to get things done as sort of project-based. And so there is some possibility that we will be able to use these kinds of techniques that we've learned in teaching for the last 15, 20 years and readjust universities in this age of artificial intelligence. There's a couple of things that will be almost certain, is that programs will have to be shorter because the half-life of knowledge is getting shorter and shorter. So the idea that students will be willing to sit in one place for 3 or 4 years and do what we tell them to seems less and less likely. But in principle, we could offer quicker, more modular programs and stackable credentials and somehow keep ahead of the curve. So the question is, are big massified BA factories, universities with 20,000 students, 50,000 students, capable of switching their teaching so that most of their teaching would look like this? That's a question. So that's a question and a possibility in the world as a second scenario.
Yeah, the question here, and I'm sure we'll hear this today, is it possible to do at scale? Yeah? If you have a university with 10,000 students, is it possible to do this kind of learning and still balance your budget? That's the fundamental basic question, I think, for universities. So this is a piece of work that I've been working on at Narrows Business School to, first of all, for myself to try and understand what's going on, and secondly, to try and give us some tools so we're not just staring at this tsunami coming at us. We at least have some way to understand it. Like most people, I'm very simple in how I try and understand things. We can't think in more than 2x2 matrices, most of us, and in 2 dimensions. So this is a thing I've called the AI matrix. It's very simple. Do you have access to AI? Human agency, can you use it well? Yeah? The outcomes, 4 broad outcomes. If you can't use it well, and you don't have much access, you're fully dependent on it. You're at the mercy of AI. If you have the access, but you don't really know what to do with it, then you're still passively dependent on it. Move up to the more positive ones. If you have a low amount of access and you know how to use it, then some people will get the advantage, others will not. And then the sweet spot at the top of the matrix here is full empowerment. Everyone has agency, everyone has access, yeah? Our argument is that traditional education doesn't really fit with empowerment. It's about automating what people do, yeah? So it's about writing your essay for you, doing your literature review, handing in your paper. It's not at its focus about creativity. So the results in our view, you have some form of dependency. You either have full dependency or a more limited dependency, but you're not getting the benefits, the augmentation, as we talked about yesterday, which more empowered people have. A lot of the debate in universities at the moment, and more generally, is about giving access to resources. Access is great, but it's one part of the equation. You have access, but the fundamental part, which we don't talk about too much, is learning how to use it. And that is the bit which is the real challenge for universities.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting, and the good thing, as you said, access is something universities can't even control at this point, right? So students can get access on their own without us helping them at pretty cheap prices. So we don't control access to the technology anymore.
Can I ask a question? So put your hands up. How many people are using AI in one form or another every day?
Yes.
Yeah?
Indeed.
Those of you who didn't put your hand up, I don't believe you.
So the point is, if we're not controlling access, it means students are using it however they want if we're not also teaching them what to do with it, right? So, and again, most universities and most companies have no really very good policies about use. They haven't actually thought through what they want to get out of this technology, what they don't want to get out of this technology. And as a result, it's a kind of wild west where students and normal people are using the technology in all sorts of ways, some of which are productive, a lot of which are not very productive.
Well, the productive and productivity issue is really, really important because we don't have ground rules established in most organizations. People use it, but a lot of them, it's sort of ghost AI, yeah? Ghost productivity. They don't tell their employer that they use it. Because if you do, what happens? You can either do more or I need less of you, yeah? So because there's no ground rules in most organizations, AI use tends to be hidden. That's why there's lots of people, lots of very smart economists trying to find the productivity gain. One of the biggest reasons is everyone's using it, but nobody's telling people they're using it. Not nobody, but lots of people. So as a result, AI doesn't work, yeah? That's the default position. But actually, everybody is using it. And the same applies in universities. Because most universities don't have policies, and if they do have policies, it's about control and denial of use. We'll catch you. Students don't talk about using it, so you're not getting the best out of it.
So this is the scenario, for better or for worse, that we think is the more likely scenario, or the most likely scenario. I mean, people who do scenario planning don't like to talk about which are the most likely ones. They just like to throw up all the scenarios. But ultimately, of course, everybody has a scenario they think is more likely. So this is our guess. AI does not become completely autonomous, so it doesn't replace humans at everything, but it does replace a lot of humans. And as a result, the Ponzi scheme of continually churning out more and more students for this knowledge economy who get jobs and improve their salaries comes to an end because there's no place for most of these students to go. And inVision U, which we will talk about today as part of this new strategy of smaller is better and more agile is better, is one answer to this question. It's our answer to this question. There are other possible answers to this question. We're not saying we're the only people in the world who have some idea of what to do, but we do have some idea of what to do and some idea of why we're trying to prepare this group of students, some of whom are sitting here in the front row trying to learn as much as they can already, which is great, as part of our project.
And this, going back to the matrix idea, I'm using creativity in the broadest possible sense. What we're looking at in terms of what inVision U is doing and how, in theory, we need to completely change how we do education, is we have to put creativity and human skills front and center, because that's what will develop the agency for you to use AI in a way that empowers you. Now, there's two paths. Everyone gets access. You could say this is the super rosy future. Everyone gets access. Because of that, the benefits spread, and everyone walks off into the sunset Think Star Trek, San Francisco in Star Trek, yeah? That's the AI future in some ways that we're talking about. Or you have a limited amount of people getting that kind of education, developing those creativity, problem solving, team working kind of skills we all talk about, but do we do much to develop? That's a matter for debate. So it's about between elites and the masses, yeah? And that's a choice. We still have agency in this. It's not 100% guaranteed. Is it a public good or is it a privilege? Now, if you ask anybody, they'll all say, of course it's a public good, but the question is, what are you doing to enable people to take advantage of this technology? And that's where it gets a bit more difficult, and that's where universities and the general education system are front and center.
Yeah, and that's the problem the universities have when they have 150 students in a class, where it's extremely difficult to bring the creativity part and push the creativity part forward. It's easy to give them information and knowledge, very difficult to boost their creativity potential in that scenario.
Maybe a different way to look at this so it doesn't seem quite so apocalyptic, if you like. We tend to have default assumptions that the way things are pretty good, yeah? The university system works fairly well. But in reality, most people, hand on heart, would say there's still a lot of problems with the education system, yeah? The danger with AI is that it accelerates those divisions. That to me is the fundamental challenge if you're interested, as I am, in trying as much as possible to develop AI as a public good. Whether that's possible or not, I don't know, but it's important to have aspirations and to try and find ways. So, another approach that we've been taking at the business school is to try and come up with some scenarios, yeah? This is very much a work in progress. We came up with the idea of grey swans. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Taleb's black swans, unforeseen events that crash the economy, have massive impact on society. The reason that we're calling them grey swans is because we know they're there. You can see them, but you're not doing much about it, yeah? A black swan, you don't see it coming, what can you do? A grey swan, it's right there in front of you, what are you going to do about it? My argument would be that AI is certainly a grey swan, yeah? So we put together two overarching paths. Do the right thing. It's up on the screen there, that starting today, we have decisive reforms in the education system. There's global consensus about this. AI literacy for everyone. We change how we award credentials, stackable credentials, all that kind of stuff. Investing in equitable access, making sure everybody gets access, and building governance in institutions, not just in universities, but across the economy. And I'll show you some odds in a minute, but the odds shift towards the best outcome we've come up with, which is managed disruption, because the status quo doesn't happen, yeah? Second one is let it rip. We continue as we are, with piecemeal reforms over the next 5 years. It's driven by the AI industry rather than managed by society as a whole. The university example, we address AI by banning it, yeah? We play the gotcha game in university regulation. We come up with policies. If you're caught using AI, you're out, yeah? Regulation is not consistent. So you get to a situation of an uneven transition where some people benefit, some people don't, or you lose control. So it will take a long technical explanation to go through this, but basically this was developed by me with my AI, yeah? I trained it on hundreds of reports by OECD, World Bank, as much literature as available, and said, okay, come up with the odds, yeah? Now, at some point we'll do some long technical explanation of it, but basically the picture is, if you do the right thing, by 2030 you have a 1 in 5 chance of managed disruption. It's around 50-50 that there'll be uneven adoption, Some places do well, some do not. And a 20% chance it all falls apart in the next 5 years. Take it out to 2050, you've got a 2/3 chance it all falls apart, even if you make the changes right now. Letting it rip, as you would imagine, is even worse. Yeah? You've got a 40% chance of losing control in 2030, only a 6% chance of managed disruption. And take it out to 25 years from now, and essentially it's saying everything falls apart. Yeah? In education, but also more generally, because this builds in other factors like economic development, economic growth, and the rest of it. So, move on. Next one.
So, what are our takeaways? If AI grows the knowledge economy but diminishes the need for knowledge workers, it could undermine the consensus that has been fueling big higher ed. We can imagine universities continuing to have some role in societies even without a need for education. They could be places for socialization. They could be places where students come for a couple of years to learn who they are, hang around, have a good time. That's still an incredibly important thing for society. But the education piece becomes much less important because there's nothing they can do with that education, at least the kind they're getting now. Universities who spend most of their time saying, what cool things can I do with AI today, which is not a very productive thing to do, instead of how can we teach our students to use this in a really productive way. So that's a problem, and they have a very short time to stop doing that and to start doing rather different things. And we believe at inVision U that this is a mistake. The future will not belong to big higher ed, which will be that dinosaur being eaten by these small mammals in our picture. But the future will belong to small, nimble mammals as it did. Here is our future of higher education. It looks like what higher education was always about, a small group of people talking about important things or working with AI to help them figure out things that are important to them, solve local problems, and then see whether those local problems can be expanded into global problems and global solutions. So what goes around comes around. At least that's our claim. So thank you all, and I think we have our next panel starting more or less right away, yes? At 11. So we have about a 15-minute break. Please file back in about 15 minutes.